Good morning. I love Facebook this morning. It's slow like I am this morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Stacy. This is Walking in My Shoes, and we are loving my veteran. We just have, again, want to welcome you. We have so much going on, as usual, in our veteran community and in our little family that we have here. This week, we've been talking about basic training or boot camp, things that we should have learned as the warfighter from the very beginning that we don't know, that we're not told about. That had we have done that from day one, life probably would have been a little easier for all of us. So we're going to explore that a little further. Before we get too started, though, I've already put the link in the group. Um, at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, that's an hour from now, join us. I'll be there with our friends at Behind the Surface Podcast for coffee conversation and collaboration. It is a great place just to unwind and kind of be ourselves and talk about anything. And they're getting ready shortly to celebrate their 1 year. So I'm really excited for them, Shauna and Libby and Aaron. So good morning, Michelle and Pam and Melissa and Sarah. It is a great morning. So don't forget to join that. We did an incredible interview with Melissa last night that I'm going to work on editing part of it out today, not taking anything out, but doing clips. Melissa shared her story with Michelle and I, and her story is amazing and heartbreaking. And I don't think you realize how strong your family and this community are until you spend time talking to people like Melissa and Nick and what they're going through. And again, I cannot thank you both enough, Melissa, you for sharing your story, and Nick for allowing it to happen, because it was truly an amazing story. Tonight, Stephanie does her little thing. Yes, it is truly Cinco something or another. um, Somebody else needs to drink for me today. So, whoever's going out and having an extra margarita, please have one for me. Thank you. Stephanie will share her little Wednesday wellness with us, which is always insightful and always great. Don't forget, we do Let's Talk on Thursday. We're back on the regular link. It's in the events, so please join us for Let's Talk tomorrow night. With that being said, let's get back to our basic training series and our boot camp for us. Things we don't know. The very first thing I'm going to tell you is that when somebody has PTSD and you get the little pamphlet and a little handout from the VA, take it, look at it, and rip it in half, because that's about as meaningful as it is. Um, we already know what they feel. We already know they feel depressed, anxious. They'll have nightmares. They'll have flashbacks. They will have mood swings. We get that. We know that. They'll shut off. They'll go away. They'll all this stuff. We know that. We understand that. Anybody who lives with PTSD or in a relationship with somebody with PTSD gets that. We already understand that. They have suicidal tendencies. I mean, it's all there. Okay, so we know that. So take that piece of paper, rip it in half, and go, we're done. Because that's literally where we are in this world. Nowhere do they ever come in and say, here is a handbook. Because if they had to give us a handbook, it would probably be, yo thick, and say, this is how you deal with it, and look at tab 21 or whatever. It doesn't exist. It does not exist. So we're going to really talk about PTSD, how it affects us, TBIs, what the difference is, how you bring it all into your relationship, the basics that we should have known from day one. The biggest key factor, missing link, and I will say this over and over and over again, and until the VA figures it out, we're going to continue to have veterans committing suicide. The biggest missing link is the family. We are the biggest missing link in the handbook. Yeah, okay, have fun with that, Sarah. You can use it for toilet paper during the next crisis. But the biggest missing link is truly the family. It is truly the family, and how we address things. That is a big missing link for us. We have to go back and understand that the social the general perception of the world is um, that people with PTSD and TBI are crazy. So we have that stigma. We have that stigma that we have to overcome. So when you live with it, and when you deal with it on a daily basis, people don't get it. They don't understand it. So it's not like you can just run out and share this conversation with your family and your friends because they're like, oh my God, you're in an unsafe environment, get out. When that is not always the case, we have to go back to the key. We have to go back and understand it is an injury. The one thing that I think Melissa shared with us, and I cannot wait for y'all to see it, I promise you I will get it up today. The one thing that Melissa shared with us that I thought was the most poignant of there were two comments she made that were the most poignant comments that in the entire, it's probably an hour long that we did, was he was so depressed at a point, and he was carving on his body, and some of us know that story, some of us don't, but that he had done his chest and his ribs and all, and he was getting ready to do his face because he wanted somebody, other people, to be able to see the injury. And I think that is a key factor in where we are. This is a hidden injury. You don't see it. If you were burned, if you were missing an arm, if you were missing a leg, you would see that injury. You don't see the mental injury. You don't see that pain. So people don't get it. They don't see it. They don't understand it. So I think that was such a key statement that was said in that conversation. And the other one was, if you don't help him, good morning, Nakia, if you don't help him, he is coming to that ER tonight, either by me, the way I'm telling you how he has to get there, or in a body bag. Those are your choices. And those were such key statements in the mindset. And so people don't understand that this is what we live with. This is what we do. This is what we go through. That they get sometimes to a point that is that dark, that we have to be supportive, and we have to be caring, and we have to be understanding of the illness, the injury, the whatever you want to call this PTSD, TBI that's going on. We have to be understanding and supportive, but you also have to set your boundaries. And learning that balance is tough. So you have to understand PTSD from their mindset, but you've also got to understand it from ours. You have to understand it from ours. I cannot imagine Melissa walking into that house and seeing her husband like that. I cannot imagine that moment. Now, if she shared that moment with anybody else, they're going to be like, ooh, he is crazy. He's going to slit your throat next. You need to leave. I mean, that would be the general society's concept. But for her, it wasn't. It was, you're going to get him help. You're going to do this. And the way she had to learn to navigate it, none of us are taught that. We are not taught that. We are not taught that PTSD, TBI is not a one-size-fits-all diagnosis. It's not a one-size cure. It's like cancer. You have cancer of various kinds and various stages. They don't amputate your boob if you have lung cancer. Okay, can I just put that out there? You don't get a mastectomy if you have lung cancer. So to sit here and say, oh, all PTSD is PTSD, nope, that's like saying all cancer is cancer. Okay, it's not the same. They don't remove your boobie if you have lung cancer. So that needs to become our mentality. It is not a one-size-fits-all, put it in a pigeonhole, this is what you have to do. Every single person is different. Every injury is different. How we overcome our injuries are different. That is a key factor in going forward and learning the basics of how to deal with this. The basics of how to go through this. Another big factor that falls in when we're learning to navigate through PTSD, another big factor that falls in is, one, in your relationship with them. We have people on here who were with them when they were active duty and didn't have PTSD. and still continue to be there. And we have people on here who are in relationships with people with PTSD that have had it for a long time. Right? And so, good morning, Susan. So we have that going on. So you have all of this that goes on. Yeah, and TBI rage is another big issue. So we have all of this going on in our lives. So where you stage into it is totally different. So if you've allowed PTSD to control your life or TBI to control your life, and all of a sudden you're going to set boundaries, right? But for 5 years it's controlled your life and you've just let it do whatever, and you've been the one who's been in the bedroom crying and saying, why am I here? And you want to make a change, and you've allowed it to control your life for 5 years. Dealing with that is going to be tougher in a lot of instances, because now you're setting new boundaries and new parameters and new stuff that they're going to have to fight with. I go back to where Sarah's talking about PTSD and TBI. Here's the deal. We have people that are handicapped across the board. Okay? We have people with physical handicaps across the board. And we have to do things a little different for people with physical handicaps. Okay? So understand that. We have people, if your spouse, your loved one, today was in a car wreck, and your child, your spouse, your mother, whomever, was in a car wreck and got severely injured, are you going to learn to change the way your life is to accommodate those injuries? Not make those injuries an excuse to live and say, well, poor baby, you're allowed to do whatever. No. Are you going to make accommodations like, do you need a walk-in shower? Do you need slide boards? Those kind of issues, those kind of things that go on. Okay? Yeah, we're going to do that. There's no difference in the PTSD TBI concept. Okay, Sarah, so he has a TBI. You know that certain things trigger and deal with that TBI that are totally different than other people, and you accommodate the TBI. You make accommodations for the limitations of the TBI. You know that that's a possibility. It's no different than putting a wheelchair ramp in your house if you need one. So telling people we can't go to this party. Telling people if you're coming over, that's fine, but we don't slam things, or we don't do this, or set those parameters out. Set those parameters up there, because you have to make it well known that this is what's going on. Parameters are there for a reason. You're not going to ask the guy that's in the wheelchair to get up and reach something off the top shelf. So you can't ask the veteran with the PTSD or the TBI to do something like go to the fireworks, or if they have a TBI and their coordination is off, you can't ask them to do something they cannot physically do. So when you're thinking about PTSD and TBI in our most basic training, you have to understand what their physical limits are. What are their emotional limits? Where are they going to be overwhelmed? We were talking that when it was in another group, they were going to go to Disney. Right? And they had planned this trip, and the veteran was excited, and they were going to go. And then all of a sudden, the veteran kind of freaks out and is like, oh, I'm not sure I want to be around all these crowds. I'm not sure I can stand in a line. Well, it was early on when Carla and I were dating. And we understand that I never dawned on me. I know about the restaurant thing. I know he can't have his back to the window, back to the door. I know all that. So I'm very conscientious about that. But this particular restaurant was one of those like Tex-Mex fix your burrito kind of thing where you have to stand in line and tell them what you want. Not thinking there's a line like right here, right, where all of the food is, and then there's a wall behind us. like a half wall. We have to walk through this, and there's people on both sides of us. So he felt very trapped, very panicked. Never dawned on me that that was going to set him off. But do you realize when you go to places like Disney, and even there, we could have sat there and ordered it online at the table and had them bring it out to us. Disney, you just go to guest services and you say, look, I'm with somebody with PTSD, and being in a line and being in a crowd triggers them. Can we do this? And they will give you special accommodations to go to the head of the line. So you can do things. You just have to find, right? You have to find a different way to do it. And that is going to be where, yeah, you can get them to watch a fireworks display. You have to start off further away. It's the sound. For Carl, it's he's got to know where they're coming from, or being the one to set them off. I mean, he's got a pyrotechnic license. So if he's in control, he knows that's coming, and so it's not the anticipation of it coming. So there are things you can do. And Sarah, you're right. Education, education, education. That's why we do this. We do this, one, so we can educate each other. But more so now, we need to get out and start educating the rest of the world. Our veterans are not crazy. Our warfighters are not nuts. They have an injury. We have become their warfighters here. So yeah, when you see the chick dressed like Melissa who carries her briefcase and walks in and says, I am his advocate, and it's funny, well, let me say it's funny, it's sad. Let me rephrase that. It is sad that she can go into the VA dressed as his advocate and get in, but she can't go as his spouse without a ration of shit. I find that overwhelming. Nakia is probably one of the best at veteran advocacy. So if you've got a true issue with how to get through the VA and the advocacy, go to Nakia. So those are the things we have to learn about PTSD, and things that we just say and we do that make life easier. I know that lately Carl's gotten really comfortable here, and I've been able to walk into a room and startle him, which is never a good thing. Okay, it's never a good thing. And so I'm not thinking about it. Mouse, you can't, the poor dog wants to come give his 2 cents worth. I can't just walk into a room and startle him, because it's not a good thing. It starts to put him in a place. And I don't want to ever do that. Well, it used to be he was so aware that it never bothered me. I mean, I never had to think about it. But now he's so comfortable that doing it, I have done it like 3 times yesterday. And so now I make a point, starting when it happened like the 3rd time yesterday, I make a point to be talking when I'm coming into the room. If I'm in the kitchen with him and we're doing something, I always say, I'm coming behind you. Because somebody coming up behind him is never a good thing. So those are the little things that you learn that nobody tells us about. Nobody says, hey, don't startle them. Nobody says, hey, just communicate a little better. Nobody says you're going to have good days. Nobody says you're going to have bad days. That whole craziness label that we're given to them is absolutely insane. So when you start to communicate and you reduce the triggers, you find that your life is better. You find that your relationships are better. You find that you can now work for them, with them. They want you to be their partner. They want you to do that. So then the next question that comes up to me, and I hear it all the time, is why are they pushing me away? Why do they push me away? If they love me, why do they push me away? Why do they say the hateful things? Why do they push me away? Because when yeah, you do. I mean, I came up and kissed the back of his neck, and that was not a good thing. I'm just telling you without saying something. When you can't take the hatefulness personally, okay? You can't take the hatefulness personally. The hateful words, the bitter stuff that comes out, most of the time, they are doing it to push you away because they don't want to hurt you. Okay? Most of the time, they are pushing you away because they don't want to hurt you. When you set up those boundaries is a whole nother thing. Boundaries are now set, and they're not getting their way. So now they're like, well, you're pushing me away. You don't love me. You don't care for me. No, I babied you and I enabled you and I spoiled you. Okay? I did it all the time. I did it all the time. And now I'm setting some boundaries and you're going to be accountable. So now they don't like in their new lifestyle, so they're going to push you away. Well, tough. Tough. They'll get over it. But their hatefulness a lot of times comes from the fact that they want to push you away because they love you. And people are like, well, if they love you, they won't talk to me that way. That's the only way they know how to communicate right now. In the very beginning, when you're starting to unravel this mess that you're in, the only way they know how to communicate, okay? The only way they know how to communicate is by being hateful. And again, Nakia used to wake Richard up with a broomstick when he had a nightmare. I don't wake Carl up when he has a nightmare. I just get up. Okay? I just get up. And yeah, they have to get used to it. You have to be careful and gentle about the way you walk in and setting boundaries. I mean, you can't come in like freaking Hitler. It's not going to work. But you have to be firm. And you're going to meet a lot of resistance, and you're going to pull your hair out, and you're going to say, oh crap, why can't we go back to the way things were? You can't. You can if you want to live that life forever, but if you don't go back. It will come around. It takes time. Every change takes time. So those are kind of like the basic things that we don't understand. We don't get. We're not told that at day one. If you were told that at day one, you'd be so different. The other thing that there absolute yes, there is a lot of resistance. And she say that she never knows when Jason's dreaming. I wake him gently when he asks me to. Usually I wake him and I have saved him. He tells me the whole dream too. And that is the relationship that you and Jason and the agreement you and Jason have. It is so important that you do that. That you have that thing. Carl said to me flat out, don't ever wake me up. And I won't. I won't. And all the time we've been together, one time has he had a dream where he was punching something, and we happened to be in a king size bed, and I happened to be at different sides of the bed, and in his sleep he was punching, and I said something to him about, you must have had a hell of a dream last night, you were punching things in your sleep, and he freaked out, thinking he was going to hurt me. I'm like, you never hit me. He's like, but what if I don't next time? What if I do next time? So that is a big deal. So just be cognitive of these kind of things. We're not told about them. We're not told, yeah, they're going to have nightmares. We're not told how to deal with them. In Sarah's case, Jason wants her to wake him up gently. They have that trust. In my case, Carl's like, don't you dare wake me up, because if you do, I'm going to hurt you, and I'm not going to mean to. Okay? Nakia used a broomstick. Those are things that nobody tells you. They don't tell you, oh, they're having a nightmare, wake them up, or oh, they're having a nightmare, don't wake them up, or nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you that. And communication begins, and yes, it takes a lot of time learning for both to communicate. Much of this will begin to be spoken about with each other, and you're right, it is true. The other thing they never ever talk about early on in PTSD is we're told over and over and over again, we're told that as we go through this, we're told don't ask them about their experiences. And I'm a firm believer in not the gory details. I am a firm believer in let's don't push them for the gory details. I don't. No, I do tell him because he'll want to know and he'll freak out. So if I don't tell him, because that creates that doubt seed for us that we're just not going there. But that's his dynamics. You know, they don't tell you. You know, yeah, I don't want to hear all the gory details if you're not ready. But I want him to communicate. I want him to learn that grief is okay. I want him to learn that anger is okay. I want him to learn that sadness is okay. I want him to learn that going through those stages of grief are okay. right? Going through those stages of grief are okay. And we do both have to learn to communicate. It was so funny for me, that it was just so funny for me that when we started talking about these stages of grief and all of this was going on, I can now look at him and say, how do you feel? How do you feel? And we talk about it. But that comes from time, and that comes from trust, and that comes from learning to communicate. And one of the things Melissa and I were talking, and Michelle were talking about last night, and it was funny, is Melissa said, I haven't broken anything in a long time. I was like, oh, me either. That's my victory, because I get that rage too, and that all burned up thing, and that never works well. So we've learned to take steps back. It wasn't always easy. I walked on eggshells for a very long time. I was miserable for a long time walking on those eggshells. I became explosive when I got to that boiling point. And when y'all think I'm kidding about walking on eggshells, I really mean that. I got so mad at him one day that I threw a dozen eggs across the kitchen all over the floor. And they shattered everywhere. And it is never a good thing to have to clean up eggs. I'm just telling you, that stuff never comes up off the floor. So I stopped. I literally walked on eggshells, and then I threw them and I walked on them again. So it was never a good thing for us. But communication is key. And you want to know what the most interesting thing I found out through this journey is? Now that I'm learning to communicate, okay? When I'm learning to communicate, oh yeah, it is definitely a process, Jennifer. Definitely a process. When I learn to communicate with him, and we kind of set up ground rules in our communication, okay? He is way more able to bring me back around and say, hey, stop. There's times that I still have to say stop, and I need a few minutes. I need a few minutes, okay? But he is way more about bringing me around and communicating. And he's like, can we talk about it? And I found that very interesting. From the person who filed everything in the box of avoidance, now we talk about it. And Nikki is right. There's communication, there's arguing. Communication and arguing are not kissing cousins. They're the enemy of each other. You can disagree. You can totally disagree. And you can talk about, you can't make people believe or follow what you want. And you may still disagree to this day on different stuff. Like for us, like I wanted to paint the house a certain color. Well, it wasn't Carl's favorite color, okay? But it didn't matter to him what color we painted the house. I mean, that wasn't a big deal. So that was just something he kind of gave into. But he didn't like the color as much as I did. That was disagreeing. And it's okay to disagree. It's okay to even really disagree on big topics, because we will disagree on big topics. If you think you're going to walk through your life and you're going to agree on everything, you have lost your marbles. You're going to disagree on big topics. The difference is, can you communicate through them, or are you going to fight through them? And when you try to fight through them, you're not getting anything done. They don't tell us that either. That's not something that we're told in this basic boot camp, right? Because arguing, and I'm agreeing with Sarah Kim, arguing makes me vomit bile. And just exactly what Sarah Kim is talking about with Nakia. I find that I argue and that I spit vile. And that is exactly what Nakia is saying here. I hit below the belt when I do that. So, we have to set boundaries in our lives for what we want them to do. But in return, we have to impose those same boundaries on us. If I don't want you to get angry and slam things around, I can't do it either. If I don't want you to yell at me, I can't do it either. If I want you to sit there and shush and listen to me, I need to sit there and shush and listen to you. So when we set boundaries and accountability boundaries, or whatever they are, we have to expect the same boundary in return. And that is a tough road to handle because it is so easy. And this is, I think, if somebody had to title what, how you begin this thing about where we feel, it is easy to blame PTSD or a TBI for everything. I think that is where you are. It is easy to blame PTSD and a TBI for everything. It is easy for them to do it. It is easy for us to do it instead of being accountable in our relationships. And you will find the more you set boundaries, the more you communicate, the more you get your relationship under control, the less and less and less PTSD plays a role in your life. The less and less and less TBI will play a role in your life. When, in Sarah Kim's case, when her husband, when Jason comes to her and says, she knows that this one particular thing or two things really antagonize or set off his TBI. And she says, you know what, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to do that anymore. Instead of, you need to suck it up and let's deal with it. Instead of her, when she takes that in and says, it makes you uncomfortable, we're just not going to deal with that anymore. We're going to do something different. And when you do that, you are respecting them and you are showing compassion and respect for them and their injury. And you are becoming more and more their advocate and more their buddy, their warfighters, their battle buddies here. And you are becoming more and more of that. And you are becoming more and more of the relationship than you ever dreamed possible. Okay? Yeah, and I think that Nakia is so right that you can't keep scorecards, because when we get into this and then one of the two of us gets snippy and we say, well, you did that yesterday, or 3 weeks ago you did that, or you used to do that. You gotta, when you're starting to set these boundaries and go forward, you gotta draw a line in the sand, and you can't bring up, if this is the boundary you're setting today, you can't go backwards and bring up whatever they did 4 weeks before that or 5 weeks before that. You have to talk about and address how they crossed the boundary once that boundary's been set. And you can't just set those boundaries in your mind either. You have to literally communicate with them the boundaries. Okay, you have to communicate that. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow is how are we effectively communicating our boundaries? Things that we should have learned very basic, very early on that nobody told us. And you're right, we keep those positive victories. Positive victories. Positive victories. That's how you make it. You have to have the positive victories. Are we going to go backwards? Absolutely. But the difference is this. Going backwards and staying backwards creates a problem. When we go backwards to a behavior that we've done for so long and realizing that we're doing it and then making the corrections in our own lives to go back to the new normal, to the new place where we've come to, that creates the positive. So yes, are you going to go back to your old ways? Absolutely. Are there days that I'm going to spew? Absolutely. Do I want to? No. But when I do, I have to stop and say, you know what? Okay, so I spewed today. I'm not going to do it every day. I screwed up. Why did I spew today? Where did my communication break down? So I can go forward, moving on without going backwards. And that becomes what there is. And as you're setting tomorrow, like I said, we're going to talk about boundaries. But when you set those boundaries, y'all, it is super tough to keep them. It is super tough to keep them because sometimes we want to go back to the path of least resistance. And you guys already know how I feel about that. So I'm going to wrap up today. I want to put this out here. I've talked to Michelle, and Michelle and I think that we would really like to do maybe a 4-part series on Tuesday nights. It would be at probably 8 p.m. Eastern time, so it would let us accommodate more people on the West Coast. And do a Zoom seminar on boot camp basic training for PTSD, where we can talk to each other instead of me just spitting it out here. That we can do that. Let me read Linda's thing because it's like quite long here. We worked so hard on communication. We both have PTSD and got through the stages of grief and acceptance. However, Hub's hearing loss is now 50%. He reacts to what he thinks I said, and I react after repeating myself 3 times. I say it once, he keeps asking me to repeat it by the 3rd time. After talking louder, he says, "Stop yelling. This is a new challenge." It is. It is. Communication's a big deal. And I was the massive enabler. I still can be at times, and Carl will tell you that. So we really thought about putting that out, and we just kind of want some feedback. I'll probably put it on a poll about doing an in-depth seminar type deal where we can really go in and talk to each other instead of just these little snippets back and forth. All right, so I'm going to get off of here in about 24 minutes. Behind the Service Podcast, that link is in there. Zoom, they have coffee, conversation, collaboration. I got to get a new cup of coffee to get ready for that. But we have so much fun when we do that. There's Carl again. They'll all say hi to you in a minute, babe, because they always do.
I'm trying to take care of a puppy.
So, again, don't forget that. I think that's pretty much where I'm at. We have Stephanie's Wellness Wednesday tonight. And tomorrow night we do Let's Talk. So everybody have a blessed day. I'm going to try to not take a nap here. Let's have a blessed day, and y'all have an amazing day, and I will talk to y'all tomorrow. Bye.